The Bible tells us the earth was without form and void, and darkness was on the face of the deep. For generations, we have accepted this as the portrait of an unfinished, primordial world waiting for God's creative command. But what if that's not the truth? What if the emptiness described in Genesis wasn't a beginning at all, but the aftermath of a terrible and forgotten end? What if, long before Adam took his first breath in the Garden of Eden, another world existed on this very planet? A world teeming with life, a creation so ancient it has been almost completely erased from history. This is a possibility so profound, so challenging, that it is almost never spoken of in our churches. Yet the clues to its existence are not found in some forbidden text, but are hidden in plain sight within the prophetic scrolls of the Old Testament. A vision was given to the prophet Jeremiah, a glimpse into a time before time, showing him an earth that was not uncreated, but unmade. He witnessed the ruins of a world that had been utterly judged and laid waste by the hand of a sovereign God. This revelation doesn't just add a footnote to our history. It redefines the very timeline of the great spiritual war between light and darkness, and it changes our understanding of why humanity was placed here. The evidence for this pre-Adamic earth has been there all along, veiled by centuries of translation and silenced by tradition. If you have ever felt in your spirit that there are deeper truths waiting to be uncovered, then I urge you to stay with me through this entire video. What was revealed to Jeremiah will not only challenge what you thought you knew, it will illuminate the true, staggering scale of God's eternal plan. Most of us read Genesis 1:2 and simply move on. The earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. We accept it. But have you ever stopped to ask a simple yet profound question? Why would a God of perfect order, light, and life begin his masterpiece with chaos, emptiness, and darkness? The Hebrew words used here, tohu vavohu, suggest not an unformed state, but a state of ruin, a desolation. It almost sounds like the aftermath of something terrible. This is where the forgotten vision of the prophet Jeremiah changes everything. In Jeremiah chapter 4, verse 23, God gives him a glimpse of a terrifying scene. Listen to the words and you will hear a chilling echo. I beheld the earth, and lo, it was without form and void, and the heavens, and they had no light. Why would Jeremiah use the exact same unique Hebrew phrase, tohu vavohu, to describe a vision of judgment? Was he looking forward, or was God showing him something that had happened long before? This opens a door to a truth that has been whispered about for centuries, often called the gap theory. The theory suggests there is a vast, unrecorded period of time between the first and second verses of Genesis. A gap. In this gap, an entire world existed, a world that was not waiting to be created, but one that had already been judged and destroyed. The darkness and the deep were not the beginning of a new creation, but the tombstone of a former one. The evidence for this forgotten world is written between the lines of Scripture, a silent testimony to a judgment so complete it was nearly wiped from memory. A cataclysmic event that served as a direct response to a rebellion that shook the very foundations of heaven. A rebellion led by a magnificent being long before humanity was ever conceived. So, what was this first creation, and who was its fallen king? If this is stirring something in your spirit, make sure you are subscribed, because the answer lies hidden in the ashes of that lost world. This vision of a ruined world wasn't just seen by Jeremiah. It echoes in the forgotten corners of ancient Jewish thought, in texts and traditions that were read alongside the Torah for centuries. The ancient rabbis, in their deep study of Scripture, spoke of God creating and destroying worlds before he established this one. Imagine a divine craftsman shaping a world, testing it, and finding it unworthy, not because he failed, but because its inhabitants did. These weren't seen as fables, but as profound theological possibilities whispered in the halls of study, far from the public square. Why was this powerful concept of a pre-Adamic judgment never taught in our Sunday schools? The answer may lie in the fragile beginnings of the early church. As leaders like Origen and Augustine worked to unify Christian doctrine, they faced a world filled with confusing and conflicting spiritual ideas. The story of a world destroyed before Adam, of a rebellion that predated humanity, was deemed too complex, too distracting. It was a truth they feared would pull focus from the saving story of Adam's fall and Christ's redemption. And so a decision was made. A great silencing began. Think of it as a vast library where certain books were intentionally moved to a hidden, locked room. Not because they were false, but because their contents were considered too profound, too unsettling for the masses. The focus was narrowed to Adam, to his sin, and to the salvation that followed. And in the process, the sheer scale of the cosmic war was lost. The memory of that first earth, a world filled with beings of light who chose darkness, was allowed to fade. It was buried under layers of tradition, a foundation stone to our own world that almost no one knows is there. But the silence does not mean absence. The truth remains, waiting for those with eyes to see and ears to hear. If you feel a stirring to uncover what was lost, I encourage you to join this community of seekers by subscribing. Because that first world was not empty. It was ruled by a magnificent creation, the most powerful angel in all of heaven. And his story, his pride, and his catastrophic fall are the very reason that darkness was on the face of the deep. What was his name, and what was the sin so terrible it required the unmaking of an entire world? Imagine a world bathed not in the light of our sun, but in the ambient glory of God himself. A world where the mountains were uncut stones of sapphire and diamond, and the rivers flowed with a light that hummed with creation's first song. This was the first earth, and it was not ruled by man. It was the dominion of a magnificent being, the highest of all angelic creations. The prophet Ezekiel calls him the anointed cherub that covereth, a guardian of the very throne of God, perfect in beauty and wisdom from the day he was created. This being, whose name echoes in the book of Isaiah, was given stewardship over that pristine world. He walked upon the stones of fire in the Eden, the garden of God. But this was not Adam's Eden. This was an earlier, perhaps a celestial version of it, a kingdom of unimaginable splendor. His sin was not of flesh, but of spirit. The scripture tells us his heart was lifted up because of his beauty. He corrupted his wisdom by reason of his brightness. In the heart of this perfect creation, the very first I will was spoken in rebellion against the I am. He desired to ascend, to be like the Most High. The omission of this story from our common teachings does more than just leave a gap in history. It shrinks our understanding of the war we are in. We think the battle began with a serpent and a fruit, but that was merely a later battle on a war front established eons before. The fall of this great cherub was not a quiet demotion. It was an act of cosmic treason that infected the very creation he was meant to guard. The judgment had to be absolute. God, in his perfect sovereignty and justice, did not merely cast him out. He unmade the entire realm that had been corrupted by this rebellion. The darkness and the void described in Genesis were not a blank canvas. They were a righteous sentence. The deep waters became a burial shroud for a world that had witnessed the birth of sin. God was not starting from scratch. He was reclaiming a territory that had been declared enemy ground. The earth was wiped clean, its memory erased, its light extinguished, preparing it for a new creation, a weaker creation, us. But why? Why would God place fragile humanity on the very ground where the most powerful of all created beings had fallen? The answer is a truth more profound than you can imagine. For 2,000 years, the story we have been told is this: the cosmic battle began in the Garden of Eden. Adam's sin was the first domino to fall, the single act that invited darkness into a perfect world. This narrative is simple, powerful, and central to our faith, but it is incomplete. The truth hidden between the lines of Jeremiah and Isaiah tells of a war that is far, far older, a war that had already been lost on this very ground, long before Adam was ever formed from the dust. So why was this profound prequel to humanity's story erased? Why is it never mentioned from the pulpit? The answer lies not in a conspiracy of evil, but in a decision of fear. Imagine the early church fathers, men like Jerome and Augustine, fighting to forge a unified faith in a Roman world filled with countless pagan gods and Gnostic heresies. They needed a clear, simple message of sin and salvation. The story of a pre-Adamic world, of an angelic fall that shattered the first creation, was deemed too complex, too distracting. It risked confusing new believers, pulling their focus from the one thing that mattered most, the cross of Jesus Christ. And so, in the great councils that would define Christian orthodoxy for millennia to come, a great silencing took place. It was a calculated omission. The focus was narrowed, the timeline was simplified. The story of Lucifer's original kingdom and its cataclysmic end was not declared a lie. It was simply set aside. It became a piece of deep knowledge, a truth considered too dangerous for the common believer, left to fade in the margins of theological debate. A foundational chapter of our reality was quietly torn out, not to deceive, but to protect. But this protection came at a staggering cost. By hiding the first war, they also hid the true reason for the second. They obscured the sheer scale of the conflict we were born into. We were not placed in a pristine garden to be tested. We were placed on the front lines of a reclaimed war zone, on the very ground where God's most perfect creation had already fallen. And that raises the most terrifying and important question of all. Why? Why would a loving God place His new fragile creation, humanity, on the ruins of a failed world as the centerpiece against an enemy of unimaginable power and ancient evil? The answer to that question is the most profound and overlooked truth in all of Scripture. We were not an afterthought. We were the answer.
Think of the universe not just as a creation, but as a courtroom. When that great cherub fell, he did not just rebel, he made an accusation against the very character of God. He claimed God's authority was tyrannical, that no created being could freely choose to love and obey him. The first earth, with its powerful angelic inhabitants, became Exhibit A in his case. Their fall seemed to prove his point. So God did something utterly unexpected. He wiped the slate clean and introduced a new kind of creation, a being made not of pure spirit and light, but of humble dust, a creature with immense weakness, frailty, and a short lifespan. He placed us, humanity, on the very ruins of that first world, the scene of the crime. We were created to be the ultimate rebuttal. If these fragile, dust-born creatures, with every reason to doubt and fear, could choose to love God freely, it would silence the accuser for all eternity. Our existence is not a test, it is a testimony. But that is not the most shocking revelation. The evidence of that first world's judgment may not be confined to ancient texts. It might be written into the very fabric of the earth beneath our feet. The vast, silent ages that science speaks of, the fossil records of strange creatures long extinct, the layers of rock that tell of cataclysm and upheaval. What if these are not a challenge to faith, but the physical scars of that pre-Adamic judgment? the silent geological tombstone of a world that God unmade. A history that was never meant to be forgotten, only understood through the eyes of faith. And there is still something that almost no one dares to say. If we were placed here as the centerpiece of this cosmic trial, what was the one thing God gave us that the angels never possessed? What is the secret weapon that makes our fragile faith more powerful than their celestial might? The answer changes everything we thought we knew about salvation. If you are seeking to understand your own place in this great cosmic story, then I invite you to continue on this journey with us. Because the climax of this forgotten war was not a battle of swords, but a display of love so profound it would redeem two worlds at once. This knowledge doesn't contradict the story of the cross. It reveals the true, staggering scale of its victory. The secret weapon God gave humanity, the one thing the angelic host of that first world never had, was not power or wisdom or beauty. It was a choice born from frailty. We were made in the image of God, given the capacity for faith, the ability to love and trust a Creator we cannot see. The first cherub stood in the full light of God's glory, and his pride still chose darkness. Our faith, forged in the shadows of a fallen world, becomes a testimony of a different kind. It is a love chosen not from a position of power, but from the humble dust of the earth. Our role in this cosmic drama, therefore, is not a passive one. We are the living evidence in the great trial of the ages. Every act of faith, every prayer whispered from a heart in pain, every choice to obey God in the face of temptation, is a direct rebuttal to the ancient accuser. Adam's fall was a tragic setback, but it did not end the trial. It only set the stage for God's ultimate witness, a second Adam. Jesus Christ, the God-man, lived out the perfect human testimony, demonstrating flawless faith and obedience, and his sacrifice on the cross was not just a pardon for human sin. It was the final verdict-rendering blow in a war that began before the foundations of our world were laid. Understanding this does not diminish our faith, it deepens it beyond measure. It doesn't replace the simple truth of the gospel. It places that truth upon the vast cosmic stage it was always meant to occupy. It explains the ferocity of the spiritual warfare we feel every day, because we are living on reclaimed enemy territory. This hidden history reveals that the cross was not just God's plan to save humanity. It was His plan to answer the oldest question in the universe and to vindicate His own holy name before all creation, seen and unseen. But the story does not end there. If humanity was the living answer to the first rebellion, and Christ was the perfect fulfillment of that answer, there is one final piece of this divine puzzle, a piece that connects the ashes of that first world to the glory of the new one to come. There was a promise hidden within God's judgment, a purpose for this earth that was never abandoned, only postponed. The final revelation is not just about a forgotten past, but about a future that will redeem everything that was lost and fulfill a plan that was set in motion before the first light ever shone. The final piece of this divine puzzle is not found in what was said, but in what God did. After He laid waste to that first corrupted world, He did not abandon the planet. He did not cast it into oblivion. He reformed it. The Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters, not as a creator starting from a blank slate, but as a restorer reclaiming what was His. The earth you stand on is not a second attempt. It is the very same stage cleared and reset for a new act in a divine play. God's plan for a physical realm, a place where His glory would dwell with a created people, was never canceled. It was only postponed. This changes our understanding of the end times entirely.
The promise of a new heavens and a new earth is not about escaping to some distant, ethereal plane. It is the ultimate redemption of this world. It is the final restoration of the original creation that was marred before Adam.
When Christ returns, he is not coming to evacuate his people. He is coming to reclaim his kingdom, to take his throne on the very ground where the first rebellion declared war against heaven. The final judgment is the final cleansing, preparing this planet to finally become what it was always intended to be, the footstool of God, a perfect fusion of the heavenly and the earthly. Therefore, the work of Jesus Christ on the cross was infinitely larger than we ever imagined. He did not just die to offer a pardon for human sin. He died to legally and spiritually reclaim the title deed to a world that had been lost. He is the second Adam, succeeding where the first failed. But he is also the true king, replacing the usurper who ruled the first earth. His resurrection was not just a victory over death. It was the first light of a new dawn breaking over a renewed creation, a promise that everything spoiled by that ancient pride would be made gloriously new through his humble sacrifice. So you see, your faith is not a ticket out of a doomed world. It is your rightful inheritance in a redeemed one. You are not just a saved soul. You are a citizen of a coming kingdom, a co-heir with the King who won back a world. The story that began with a forgotten cataclysm and a world plunged into darkness will not end until that same world is filled with the glory of God as the waters cover the sea. The plan was never abandoned. It was just waiting for the perfect witness, the perfect sacrifice, the perfect king. It was waiting for Jesus. This is not just a piece of ancient history. It is a fundamental shift in how we understand our own lives, right here, right now. For generations, many have felt a profound disconnect, a sense that the simple stories we were taught do not fully explain the sheer intensity of the spiritual battle we feel around us. This forgotten truth is the missing piece. It explains why evil is so ancient, so intelligent, and so deeply entrenched in the fabric of this world. It reframes God's plan not as a simple reaction to Adam's sin, but as a masterful, eons-long campaign to reclaim a world that was declared enemy territory before humanity ever existed. If this knowledge is stirring something deep within you, understand that it is not by accident. This truth is not for the spiritually complacent or for those who are content with a faith that asks nothing of them. It is for the seeker. It is for the watchman on the wall. It is for every soul who has looked at the world and felt in their spirit that there is a far older, far deeper story unfolding just beneath the surface. This is the kind of revelation that God unseals for a generation that is ready to grasp the true scale of His sovereignty and the profound depth of the war they were born into. This is perhaps why so much of modern faith can feel shallow, a mile wide and an inch deep. We have been handed a story with the first chapter torn out. Without the context of this ancient war, without understanding the fall of the first creation, our own struggles can seem random and our purpose unclear. We are taught to fight battles without ever being told how the war began. This revelation restores that context. It reminds us that our faith is not a self-help program. It is our enlistment in a cosmic conflict, and our every choice has eternal significance. Therefore, this truth is not meant to frighten you. It is meant to arm you. It is a divine intelligence briefing for the saints living in the final act of this great drama. It gives meaning to suffering, purpose to prayer, and an unshakable foundation to our hope. We are not just waiting for an escape. We are occupying territory that our King has already reclaimed. By remembering what was silenced, we are re-engaging with the fullness of God's eternal purpose. And it is in that purpose that we find the strength not just to endure, but to overcome. So take a moment, let this profound truth settle in your spirit. Your life, your faith, your struggles, they are not isolated events in a short timeline.
You are a participant in a cosmic story that spans ages, a living testimony on the very ground where the first rebellion took place. This knowledge does not change the gospel, it magnifies it. It shows us that God's plan was never a simple repair job, but a masterful and eternal strategy to prove His goodness and redeem all of creation through the willing faith of His children. For centuries, this wider narrative remained a whisper in the halls of deep theological study, a truth veiled by tradition and deemed too complex for the common believer. But nothing hidden stays hidden from God. We believe that in these times, the Spirit is uncovering these foundational truths, not to distract us, but to arm us. He is restoring the missing chapters of our own story, so that we may understand the true weight of our calling and the magnificent scale of the victory won for us at the cross. If this truth is burning in your heart, if it confirms something your spirit has long felt, we invite you to partner with us in spreading this light.
Please take a moment to like on this video, subscribe to the channel, and be sure to ring the notification bell so you don't miss what is coming next. We have also launched our channel membership. By becoming a member, you are directly blessing and supporting this ministry, empowering us to continue creating edifying and revealing content just like this. And finally, we want to hear from you. In the comments below, please tell us where you are watching from. It is a profound encouragement for us to see just how far God is allowing this truth to reach hearts around the world. Never forget, you were placed here on this reclaimed earth as a witness to the eternal wisdom and redemptive love of Jesus Christ. He is the answer to a war that began in the darkness before time, and He is the glorious King who will reign when time is no more.